Mason County, Mississippi, was the kind of place most people pass through without a second thought. Long dirt roads, endless cornfields, and a sun that baked the land until it cracked. Folks lived simple lives there: church on Sundays, supper at 6, and work from dawn till dark. It was a town where everybody knew everybody, and secrets didn't last long. But some secrets, especially the dangerous ones, buried themselves deep until they exploded. Eugene Carter was a third-generation farmer. Tall, quiet, and strong as an ox, he lived on the land his grandfather once plowed with mules. His wife, Loretta Carter, was the heart of the farm. Beautiful in a soft, quiet way, she cooked, cleaned, and helped with the crops when needed. Everyone in Mason County thought they were the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, things weren't so perfect. From the outside, Loretta and Eugene Carter looked like they had it all: land, a cozy home, and a peaceful life. But even the strongest walls start to crack when the foundation's weak. Loretta had been feeling like a shadow in her own life. Eugene wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either. He worked hard, came home tired, ate his meals in silence, and fell asleep on the recliner every night. She craved more attention, more love, more life. Eugene never noticed Loretta's restlessness. He figured putting food on the table and keeping the bills paid was enough. But Loretta started spending more time in town, buying small things she didn't need, just for an excuse to get out of the house. She smiled at strangers, laughed a little louder at the grocery store, and dressed up just enough to feel seen. That's when she met Tavon Brooks. Tavon Brooks was everything Eugene wasn't. He was younger, barely 30, with smooth skin, an easy smile, and hands always stained with oil from working on cars. He ran his uncle's auto shop at the edge of town. Loretta first stopped by to fix a rattle in her old Chevy. Tavon fixed the rattle in under 10 minutes, but Loretta stayed for nearly an hour, just talking. She came back a week later, this time for an oil change she didn't really need. Tavon noticed. He wasn't blind. He saw the way Loretta looked at him. The little smiles. The soft touches on the arm. And soon, he was looking back at her the same way. Their conversations turned into flirtation. Then flirtation turned into long drives on back roads, away from town. And then it turned into something neither of them could stop. It started with a kiss behind the auto shop. One kiss turned into many. Then came motel rooms just outside Mason County, where nobody would recognize them. Loretta felt alive again, like a woman instead of just a wife. Tavon made her laugh. He listened. He made her feel like the world hadn't passed her by. She knew it was wrong. Knew the risk. But she told herself Eugene wouldn't care. He hadn't touched her in months. He barely looked at her anymore. So she kept going back. Week after week. Tavon, on the other hand, started catching feelings. He talked about leaving town. Starting fresh. He even said the word she wasn't ready to hear: "We don't gotta hide forever, you know." But Mason County doesn't keep secrets for long. In small towns like Mason County, people notice everything. Loretta tried to be careful, but whispers started to spread. Someone saw her at the diner with Tavon, just talking, but too close. Someone else noticed her car parked outside the old highway motel more than once. Folks didn't say much to her face, but behind closed doors, the gossip churned like butter. One morning, Eugene came home early from the feed store. Loretta wasn't there. Her car was gone, and so was her overnight bag. He didn't say a word. Just sat on the porch and stared across the fields. When she walked in that afternoon, he asked no questions. She offered no explanations. But things changed from that day. The silence in the house got colder. Sharper. Eugene wasn't a stupid man. He may have been quiet, but he wasn't blind. He started watching Loretta quietly. Her phone was always on silent. She kept it face down. She'd leave the room to answer texts. When she smiled, it wasn't for him anymore. One night, he followed her. He watched from a distance as she climbed into Tavon's truck near the edge of town. They kissed, right there in the open, like it was nothing. Eugene's face didn't change. He just lit a cigarette, leaned against his truck, and watched until they disappeared down the back road. Eugene felt rage rise in him like wildfire, but he wasn't a man who yelled or fought. He held it in, just like his daddy taught him. But inside, he was tearing apart. The woman he built his life with was sneaking around with some younger man who didn't even own land. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. He thought about confronting Tavon, then thought better of it. People in Mason County didn't solve problems with words. They solved them with quiet decisions that couldn't be undone. Tavon started to feel uneasy. "You sure your husband don't know?" he asked Loretta one night as they lay tangled in motel sheets. Loretta laughed it off. "Eugene don't care. He ain't said a word." But Tavon had heard things around town too. Somebody said Eugene had been asking questions. Another said he'd been at the gun store last week, not for hunting season. Tavon wasn't scared, but he wasn't stupid either. "Maybe we ought to lay low for a while," he said. Loretta didn't want to hear that. She was tired of hiding. Tired of the lies. She wanted out. "Maybe I should just leave him," she whispered. A week later, Loretta told Eugene she needed to go stay with her sister in Baton Rouge for a while. Eugene didn't blink. Just nodded. "Take what you need." She expected him to beg, to ask questions, to fight for her. But he didn't. He just went out to the barn, fed the horses, and came back inside like nothing had changed. That night, Loretta packed 2 suitcases and slipped out before sunrise. She didn't go to her sister's. She went straight to Tavon's. For a few days, it felt like freedom. Loretta stayed at Tavon's little trailer just outside the county line. They talked about moving away for good, maybe Atlanta, maybe Charlotte. Somewhere big. Somewhere new. But Eugene hadn't said his last word. He may not have spoken it out loud, but in his mind, something was already in motion. He started asking people if they'd seen his wife. He even called her sister in Baton Rouge. When she said she hadn't heard a word, Eugene knew Loretta had chosen Tavon. And Eugene Carter wasn't a man to let someone take what was his. After a week away, Loretta came back to the farm, but not to stay. She needed more of her clothes, and a few important documents Eugene kept locked in the desk. Tavon stayed in the truck while she went inside. Eugene opened the door like he'd been expecting her. He didn't yell. Didn't ask questions. Just watched as she moved through the house like a ghost. "You done with me?" he asked quietly. Loretta froze. Her hand was on the desk drawer. "Eugene. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "You done with me?" he asked again. She looked at him, then nodded. "Yeah." Later that night, Eugene sat in the barn, sharpening his old hunting knife. The horses shifted restlessly. A storm rolled in, the wind howling through the slats in the walls. He left the barn door open, a thing he never did. But this night, he wanted the wind to come in. He wanted it to carry the weight of what was coming. He'd lived a life by the rules: work hard, marry young, raise a family. But what did it get him? A cold bed, a wife that lied, and a town full of whispers. The wind picked up, and Eugene's eyes glinted under the barn light. The next day, Pastor Lionel Wilkes stopped by the farm. He'd heard about Loretta leaving, and he came to check in on Eugene. "You holding up, brother?" he asked gently. Eugene nodded, quiet as ever. "I'm fine." But the pastor saw something behind those eyes. A coldness he hadn't seen before. "You need to talk, I'm here," he said. Eugene didn't respond. Just thanked him and walked him back to the truck. As the pastor drove off, he looked back once. Eugene stood still in the driveway, staring after him, like he was already somewhere else in his mind. Tavon, on the other hand, was feeling bold. He wasn't hiding anymore. He even showed up in town with Loretta on his arm. Folks stared, and some even shook their heads. It wasn't just about the affair, it was the disrespect. Everybody knew Eugene. He was one of their own. At the gas station, Tavon ran into Eugene face to face. They locked eyes. Neither said a word. But Eugene gave him a look, a quiet promise that this wasn't over. Tavon laughed it off to his friends, but deep down, he felt it, that old farmer wasn't done yet. A week later, Loretta went missing. Tavon called around, thinking maybe she'd gone back to her sister's or taken off on her own. But she hadn't. Her phone was off. Her bag was still at the trailer. Her car was found abandoned off a dirt road near the edge of the Carter farm. Tavon went to the sheriff's office, but all they did was take his statement. "People leave sometimes," the deputy said. "You sure she didn't just change her mind?" Tavon knew better. Loretta wouldn't disappear without telling him. He knew exactly where to look next: Eugene Carter. Word spread fast in Mason County. By the second day, everybody knew Loretta Carter was missing. Some blamed Eugene. Others whispered she might have run off for good. But the tension in town was thick. Tavon couldn't sit still. He drove by the farm twice that day. He knew Eugene was home, he saw the truck. But the place looked dead quiet. No dogs barking. No movement. Just that old barn door creaking in the wind again. At the diner, an old-timer named Ms. Riini said it out loud. "Ain't no woman just vanish like that unless a man made it happen." After 3 days with no word from Loretta, the sheriff finally opened a missing persons case. Sheriff Calvin Donovan was no fool. He'd grown up with Eugene. Knew his quiet ways. Knew what silence could mean. He paid Eugene a visit. The house was spotless. Too spotless. Eugene sat in the kitchen like nothing had changed, sipping black coffee. "You heard anything from Loretta?" the sheriff asked. "Nope. Mind if we take a look around? Be my guest." They searched the house, the barn, the fields. But nothing looked out of place. And nothing looked like Loretta. 2 days later, a teenage hunter named Malik Wiggins was out near the Westwoods, not far from the Carter property, chasing a deer trail. He came across something strange. Freshly turned soil, behind a pile of rusted farm equipment. He didn't touch it. Just ran home and told his father. That's how the sheriff found the shallow grave. The body was wrapped in a tarp, hands bound with a nylon rope, mouth covered with duct tape. It was Loretta. Her face bruised. Her fingernails cracked and broken, she had fought for her life. Sheriff Donovan returned to the farm. This time, no small talk. "We found her, Eugene." Eugene didn't ask where or how. He just set his coffee down and stood up, hands behind his back. "You do what you gotta do," he said. He was calm. Too calm. When they searched the barn again, they found blood under the floorboards. And a tarp identical to the one Loretta was wrapped in. But still, Eugene said nothing. Tavon stood outside the sheriff's office when Eugene was brought in. Their eyes locked once more, no yelling, no threats. Just a long, cold stare. Mason County was in shock. Some folks defended Eugene. He was pushed too far, they said. Others wanted justice. You don't get to kill just because your pride got hurt. Tavon gave a statement on the news. His voice cracked as he said Loretta didn't deserve to die for falling in love. People had mixed feelings. Some still blamed him for stirring up trouble in the first place. But one thing was clear, this wasn't over. The trial was coming. And more secrets were about to be dragged out into the light. The courthouse in Mason County hadn't seen a murder trial in over 12 years. Now, folks lined up outside just to get a seat inside. Reporters came from nearby counties, cameras flashing, trying to catch a glimpse of the man accused of killing his own wife. Eugene Carter hired a quiet but sharp defense attorney named Marshall Dyer. His angle was simple: no confession, no murder weapon, and plenty of reasons to doubt the timeline. But the prosecutor, Tina Maddox, had her case stacked with evidence, motive, blood in the barn, rope matching the bindings, and most importantly, Loretta's last phone call, made to Tavon just 40 minutes before she vanished. The trial split the town. Some folks called Loretta a cheater who got caught. Others said she was a woman just trying to feel alive again. Eugene had supporters too, people who saw him as a quiet, hard-working man pushed to the edge. Old church ladies prayed outside the courthouse. Teenagers posted TikToks from the steps. And inside, every seat was filled, every day. People hung on every word like it was a movie. Tavon testified on day 3. His voice trembled, but he told the truth. About the affair. About the motel rooms. About the love. And finally, about the last voicemail she left. I think Eugene knows. I'm scared. I'm coming to see you. One witness changed everything, Dolores Hightower, a neighbor who lived half a mile from the Carters. She testified that on the night Loretta vanished, she saw Eugene dragging a large black bundle into the barn after midnight. The defense tried to shake her testimony. But Dolores didn't flinch. I know what I saw. That woman was in trouble. Then came the forensic expert. Blood samples matched Loretta's, found under the barn floor. The rope was traced back to a brand sold only at the local farm supply store, and Eugene had bought some just 2 weeks before. The pieces were falling into place. Even Eugene started looking tired. On the 10th day of trial, the court gasped when Eugene took the stand. Everyone thought he'd stay silent. But he looked at the jury and spoke with a low, steady voice. He didn't deny the affair. Didn't deny being angry. But he said he blacked out that night. One moment, I was in the kitchen. The next, I was in the barn. My hands, they had blood on them. I didn't plan to kill her. But I did. Tears filled his eyes. I loved her. But she broke me. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Some wept. Some stared in stunned silence. But there it was, the confession. After 11 days, the jury came back with the verdict, guilty. Eugene Carter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tavon never showed up for sentencing. He left town the night before, packing up his life and heading south. Said he couldn't bear to stay in a place that stole the woman he loved. Loretta's grave sat on the hill behind the old Baptist church, covered in sunflowers. The same kind she used to keep in a vase on the kitchen table. Mason County moved on, slowly. But the stain of what happened never truly faded. Life in Mason County felt strange after the trial ended. People stopped whispering in the streets, but the heaviness lingered. The Carters' farmhouse sat abandoned, windows boarded up, the cornfield left to rot. Kids dared each other to sneak onto the property, claiming they saw Loretta's ghost in the upstairs window. Pastor Lenny from the local Baptist church held a service for peace. Let the dead rest, and the living heal, he preached. But healing was slow. Loretta's sister, Charlene, who had flown in from Ohio for the trial, stayed in town for weeks trying to settle her affairs. She couldn't understand how it all ended like this. Loretta just wanted love, she kept saying. Tavon Brooks vanished after the verdict. No goodbye, no note. Just gone. Some said he moved to Atlanta. Others swore they saw him working at a gas station in Birmingham. A few whispered darker rumors that guilt ate him up, or that he couldn't live with the fact that Loretta died because of him. He never claimed her body. That task was left to Charlene. She chose a simple headstone. Loretta Mae Carter, a woman who wanted more. Months after Eugene's conviction, a box was discovered in the barn's attic. Inside were letters, handwritten notes from Loretta to Tavon, never sent. Dozens of them. She wrote about her dreams of escaping. About opening a bakery in Florida. About the names they'd give their kids. But the last one stood out. If anything happens to me, Tavon. Know I loved you. I wanted to run, but maybe I waited too long. Please don't blame yourself. He wasn't always like this. The letters were never used in court, but Charlene had them published in the Mason Times. The article went viral, sparking national conversations about domestic violence and emotional neglect. In prison, Eugene was quiet. He kept to himself. No visitors, no letters, no calls. The guards said he mostly sat in his cell and stared at the wall. One day, a journalist visited him for a prison interview. When asked if he regretted it, Eugene said nothing for a long time. Then he whispered, "I didn't just kill her. I killed every part of myself that loved her." The interview never aired. But the words stayed with the reporter forever. 2 years later, a new family bought the Carter property. They tore down the barn and built a modern farmhouse in its place. Some folks welcomed the change, others called it disrespectful. But time moves on. The story of Loretta Carter still lives in the town's memory. Her case is taught in local college classes on criminal justice and domestic abuse. Teens share YouTube videos titled "The Woman Who Died for Love" and "Mason County's Darkest Day." And every spring, someone nobody knows who places a bouquet of sunflowers on her grave. 3 years after Loretta's death, Charlene received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single page, typed, unsigned. Eugene didn't do it alone. Look deeper into what happened in the barn that night. A friend. Charlene stared at the letter for hours. Who would send this now? What did they mean by "didn't do it alone"? She handed the letter over to the county sheriff, but it was treated as nothing more than a hoax. "People trying to stir up old ghosts," he said. But Charlene couldn't shake the feeling. Something about it felt true. Charlene contacted a retired investigator named Thomas Green, a black man with nearly 30 years in homicide who had recently moved near Mason County to live quietly with his wife. She begged him to take one look at the case. He agreed. Thomas reviewed the crime scene photos, the autopsy, and witness testimonies. He didn't say much for weeks, but then he asked Charlene a simple question. Why weren't there any fingerprints on the tire iron? Loretta's cause of death had been blunt force trauma with a rusted tire iron found near the barn. Eugene never denied using it, but no prints had ever been recovered. That had always bothered Thomas. And now, it bothered Charlene too. Charlene dug deeper, looking through Tavon's old phone records, ones she'd legally obtained with a lawyer's help. There were dozens of texts between Tavon and a woman named Kenya Douglas, Eugene's niece. Kenya had worked part-time at the farm during the fall harvest. She'd also briefly lived in the Carter's guest house. One message from Tavon read, "Don't tell her what we talked about. Just wait. It'll all fall into place." Charlene was stunned. Was Tavon playing both women? And what exactly were they waiting for? Charlene tracked Kenya down in Baton Rouge, where she'd recently given birth and was living under a different name. At first, Kenya refused to talk. But after hours of pleading, she admitted something shocking. "I told Tavon that Eugene was cheating. That's what started the fire." Apparently, Eugene had been sneaking around with a waitress from out of town. Kenya, jealous and bitter, told Tavon, who then told Loretta. That revelation pushed Loretta over the edge. But Kenya said she never thought it would lead to murder. They were planning something, Charlene. Loretta was gonna leave Eugene. She just didn't know Tavon had his own plan. With Kenya's confession and Thomas's notes, Charlene pieced together a new theory, that Tavon may have arrived at the barn before Eugene that night. Maybe the argument turned violent. Maybe Loretta tried to end it with Tavon, and things got out of hand. But when Eugene showed up, and saw Loretta already bloodied on the ground, maybe he thought she had betrayed him one last time, and finished what Tavon started. It was a chilling theory, with no hard proof. Yet, a fresh investigation was quietly opened. Weeks into the reopened investigation, Thomas visited the barn again. He had a theory about the original fire that Eugene had set to hide the evidence. But something didn't sit right. A metal box had been recovered near the barn foundation, one that hadn't been fully examined years ago. Inside, charred scraps of clothing and a watch were found. Forensics tested what remained of the fabric. It belonged to Tavon Brooks. He had been injured that night. A farmhand named Caleb White, now in his 70s, reached out to Charlene. He claimed he had seen Tavon's car near the barn the night of the murder but never told the police. "Didn't want to get in no mess," he said. "I heard shouting. A man yelling, a woman crying. Then two men hollering at each other. I stayed back." He thought it was just a lover's fight. But now, he knew it was much more. Charlene, with Thomas's help, confronted Tavon. At first, he denied everything. But when shown the burned shirt remains and told Caleb's account, he got quiet. "I didn't kill her," Tavon said. I wanted her to choose me. But she was leaving both of us." He confessed that Loretta had planned to run off alone away from both Eugene and Tavon. He couldn't stand it. He went to the barn to stop her, and things turned violent. "I pushed her. She fell. Hit her head. Eugene showed up a minute later. He thought I was attacking her, he lost it. Eugene wasn't innocent, but he hadn't started the fire. He had arrived to find Loretta hurt, bleeding. In a fit of rage and heartbreak, he struck her again, sealing her fate. Tavon fled, and Eugene set the fire, trying to destroy what was left. 2 men. 1 woman. 3 shattered lives. With Thomas's report and Tavon's recorded confession, a new grand jury was formed. But Tavon had left the state. It took months to locate and arrest him in Alabama. He was charged with second-degree manslaughter. Eugene, already serving life, was not retried. But for the town of Mason County, the truth had finally surfaced. Charlene stood at her mother's grave, a cold breeze sweeping across the field. She finally had answers. Not peace, but answers. She placed fresh lilies on the headstone. "You weren't perfect, Mama. But you deserved more than lies. You deserved better men. Better love." Thomas retired for good after the case. Kenya disappeared again. Eugene died in prison 2 years later from pneumonia. Tavon was sentenced to 12 years. He never showed remorse. Today, the Carter farm stands abandoned. The barn is gone, burned to the ground long ago. But locals still talk about that night. About the farmer, the mechanic, and the woman torn between them. Charlene published a book. The title? What the Dirt Covered. A story of love turned deadly, truth buried beneath jealousy, and the ghosts we leave behind when the truth is too painful to tell. Remember to share, like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on the following story.